Hey everybody, welcome to the art stream. Usually there's the intro, but yeah. I'm used to it being the other button. Hey everybody, hope you're all doing okay. I knew I was pressing the wrong button, I still pressed it anyways. Thanks for the cheer, Lily. Okay, so welcome to the first me Scribble support. I'm Sam. That should probably be obvious by the name of the title, but this is going to be a segment where we kind of go over some different artists' work. Hopefully the music's not too loud. This won't be a super long stream, but we're going to go over about 4 different pieces that were picked out and submitted by you at the Discord. If you would like to have yours looked at and drawn over by me and have me critique it and all that good stuff, yeah, go to Scribble support. Say you'd like it for one of the Scribble streams. They aren't going to be super frequent, but they will happen. Hopefully the fans aren't too bad. It is just, it's way too hot for me not to have them on. There's no like bad interference, is there? I hope not. Alright. Sounds good? Okay, cool. Alright, so this first one is by Blue. It looks pretty good so far. It's not too shabby. Really the biggest thing with it, I would say, is just working on anatomy, which is easier said than done. So Blue Lip submitted this one. I don't have any fancy infographics. Maybe eventually I will. But honestly, the first thing that I would do is if I'm ever doing a pose or I'm ever doing anything in general, I'm always going to look up reference. So I'm just going to pull up this, I'm just going to look up photos. I'm going to look up different photos to kind of have an idea of like, okay, what does a person look like in a suit? It doesn't have to be the exact same pose, but I want to get an idea how a suit fits on that character or how the costume design is going to look in real life. You always want to use reference. If you're not using reference when you're drawing, what are you doing? Go find some photos. Go find some things that are going to give you some insight into how people look when they're in suits. How do they stand? How do they perform, you know, all that kind of stuff. I'm always going to use that as kind of a reference point. Yeah, and depending on what type of suit you want, Lily makes a good point. Like, anatomy's hard, and then part of it is just you want to have some kind of reference point just to go off of, even if you're not going to draw it exactly like that. There's so many different kind of cuts of suits. There's so many different styles of suits. You always want to do it. That way it makes your stuff look less generic in general. I'm going to kind of go with this one. I dig it. I'm not really going to use that pose. I'm going to go ahead and shove this over to the other side of the screen. I should be able to make that smaller. Yeah. And go ahead this and make this screen slightly bigger. So just in general, like this comes down to a little bit of just anatomy stuff. Just really working on kind of the pose. I'm going to make sure my smoothing's off. And I'm just going to kind of work out some of these. Hopefully, feeling a little bit of lag from my drawing pencil. I'm not sure if that's... I'm going to turn this off. Turn off my smoothing. See if that helps. And now it's... Oh, it's drawing on the other layer. Duh. That's why. So first things first, I'm going to start kind of getting in my pose. Typically with like any type of character, the hips and the shoulders tend to tilt to different sides, so you can kind of use that as a good barometer. You don't want to usually do it too much, but just in general, that helps to kind of get a good feel for it. But yeah, anatomy is really hard. It just comes down to practice. The more you work at it, the more you study it, the easier that it gets. I was not very good at it, but I've just kind of kept on practicing over and over, have his hips slightly tilted. And whenever I'm doing a pose, I'm pretty much doing something like this. Just like rough sketching. Sometimes it's a bit more anatomical, but honestly, not too often. More often than not, it's just, you know, kind of just figuring out the design pose. I'm going to push out this arm just to make the silhouette stronger. Looks like he's doing kind of like a hey there, how's it going kind of pose. So yeah, I'm going to push that arm out a little bit more. I might even just tweak it like that, because especially when you're creating a design or you're creating a character, you want to make sure that they have a strong silhouette. Especially for also a person in a suit, they tend to be having dominant figures, so probably like a more triangular, barrel-chested kind of look for it. figuring that out. Also depends on what you're trying to accomplish. Maybe you want the character to be really sleazy. So if you want the character to be really sleazy, you have the suit that doesn't really fit very well. But this character seems like they're very well put together, very suave, very debonair. So I'm going to kind of try and give that look. I have one dominant leg that's holding all the weight. But in general, I'm going to have one other leg just be kind of pushed out just ever so slightly. Maybe one of their feet is kind of slightly curved up. And maybe I want to take this leg and kind of dominate a little bit more. All this stage is really is just figuring out, like, going over proportions and kind of like, you know, really just kind of massaging the design. I'm not really worried about, like, perfecting it. I'm really just worried about getting the attitude down for that pose. Yeah, he likes suits. No worries, Hyperspace Cats. Sorry if I'm a little drowsy too. I've been teaching all day, but I wanted to get this one out. I've been meaning to do this for a while. I know a bunch of you have been looking forward to it, and I've been wanting to do it. I just didn't expect to be teaching this year, at least not in the amount that I'm teaching right now. So, not a super long one, but I want to get through these 4 pieces and kind of give some tips and tricks to all you all. And remember, you know, how I do art is not the only way to do art. It's just how I've learned how to do it. But slowly just kind of massaging the design. I'm going to kind of remove that just so I can see a little bit more. I honestly might have him just walking, honestly, instead of just having him stand still. Kind of like the idea if he's just kind of walking forward and like saying, hey. Like maybe he's walking away from something. Just because everyone draws characters like standing up straight and down. Add a little bit more attitude to him. Kind of have this floopy hair stuff going on. Nice. That's awesome, Pam. Yeah, thanks, Hal. Like, I'm doing fine. I just had to wake up really early. We had meetings early this morning for some of my students, so that threw me off. But it happens. It's part of the job. Kind of get those curls going on. He's got very, like, maybe have some of it slicked back. Figuring out the nose. Figuring out the eyebrows. You're not really overly committing to really anything at the moment when you're doing this phase. It's all just temporary stuff. Just stuff to kind of start figuring out where all the proportions are going to go. And as I'm working through it, I'm going to start kind of lowering the opacity for a lot of that stuff. Kind of getting that little pinky look. Start getting down for the neck. And remember, with suits and stuff, in general, they have really broad shoulders. I was pantomiming for a minute, because I'm usually on webcam for my students. So I was like, wait a minute, I can't do that here. There's no webcam. They have really broad shoulders. Especially in those suits, they tend to be built in to the suit themselves. So you want to kind of think about that. It's really depending on what you're doing for that character. Yeah, hair is like really weird. When you're drawing hair, you want to draw it in shapes. It was one of the first lessons I learned when I was an illustrator in college. You don't want to draw the hair in separate fibers. Just draw them in big chunks of hair. The only exceptions for these is like Bakugo from My Hero Academia or Naruto. Like they have weird hair. So they're a bit harder to kind of nail down. But even with like the suit, I'm really just going for like big broad shapes. I love it when suits are like partially open. So I'll go ahead and kind of open that up a little bit so you can see a bit more of their vest. Seems to be a bit more of the fashion now. Like I'm saying, you just want to kind of observe what other things have, like what real life designs have going for it. And a lot of this just comes down to training. The more you practice folds, the more you practice this stuff, the easier that it gets. but just slowly going through, you know. Hairstyles just come down to, hey, breaking apart different parts. And especially for illustration, you're just kind of going through changing little bits at a time. Yeah, you know, it's something you have to dedicate yourself to, but you got to flip around. Sometimes I'm working on buildings pan. Sometimes I'm working on, what is it? I'm working on humans. Like, I flip all the way around. Whenever I need work on something else, like, I don't draw humans that much. I mean, in terms of practicing, I draw them all the time. But for a while there, like, that was all I was practicing. And then I kind of switched to working on, you know, cars and animals and just kind of flip-flopping. That way I can be as well-rounded as possible. I need this leg to come out a little bit more. And if you're working in Photoshop or you're working digitally, don't be afraid to kind of use the lasso tool and kind of just move things around, you know, as you're going. Don't be too committed to what you originally drawn. It goes the same way if you're drawing traditionally. Just digitally, there are little tricks and stuff you can do to kind of make it better. And obviously, your style, everyone's style is going to be a bit differently. Some people are going to focus more on realism. Some people are going to focus more on all kinds of stuff. It really just depends. My stuff tends to be more angular. So, like I said, take all this with a grain of salt in some ways. Like, you can always do it different. These are just the ways that I learned how to draw from when I was at the Academy of Art. And the ways that I found best through my 5 years of teaching. 5 years? Yeah, I think it's been 5 years now. So yeah, even like that, I feel like this is already a more dynamic design. I would probably put his, you could even put his hand out like that, like you have it normally. Hand's kind of at his waist. He's walking away. I need to fix up this shoe a little bit more. Shoes in perspective are annoying. But yeah, even just like that, like the main thing is just getting more fluidity with the design, getting that line of action going through the spine, just trying to get a little bit more character out of it other than them just kind of standing there. You could do a just standing there pose too. Like if I was to do it, angle that, pull up that hand. I just don't like it when hands are typically in front of the body, especially for like a character pose. I tend to move it over a little bit just because it gives more, what is it? It gives a better, stronger silhouette. You always want to kind of think about that when you're drawing it. So you can still do that, but yeah, I would just push that arm out if you want it to be standing still. Go ahead and read some comments. I found that flowy fabric in hands better since doing Hollow Knight because the cloaks and segmented bug hands. Yeah, working on that kind of stuff definitely helps a lot. Certain things in nature help out a ton when you're drawing from like nature and you want to get more flowy stuff in that nature. But yeah, for Blue Lip, this is kind of what I would do. Obviously, you know, I'm not going to finish this piece. These are just the ideas that I have in terms of like correcting this, or not so much correcting, but you know, elevating and kind of upping that level. Like this is what I would do with this piece. And you know, you can always add other stuff like buttons, and you can go into as much detail and maybe add like the little, what do I call that, an ascot? I don't know, something like that. But yeah, just kind of keep on working through it and, you know, adding more detail as you go. So yeah, that's kind of what I would do to pump it up. There's still other things I would keep on tweaking. Like maybe I would pull this leg out a little bit more. Maybe bend it a lot, like slightly more. But in general, like, yeah, that's kind of what I do. I always want to think of the character in some kind of situation. And I don't know, just to give him a little bit more pizzazz, I'd, yeah, have him kind of strutting his stuff a little bit more. Alright, so now that we've covered Blue Lips, let's go over and cover Cheesy Butter went ahead and submitted this awesome pixel art. So pixel art's a little bit out of my territory, but, I mean, pixel art is just 2D animation. It's just, you know, different way of drawing. So the main way that I would go about this one is I would look up fighting poses. I would look up action poses and be like, okay, I'm not even gonna like copy any of these. I'm just like, all right, what makes a good action pose? And usually it's flow. Usually it's some kind of like movement to it, capturing that sense of motion as someone's about to attack type of stuff. So I would view different reference ones. I like this one a lot too. Lots of line of action, everything's kind of coming to a point. Same kind of idea. And while you can't completely replicate this in pixel art, everything is lunging towards a point, and you want to make sure you're doing that with your pose kind of work. So with this one, it looks like he's ready for battle. So in general, what I would do, and this is kind of like how I would handle it. First, I would kind of get in the head, and I would lower the shoulders. Like he's like about ready to pounce, like Wolverine style, almost. And really just hunch over that back. Bring that fist around. And really just lunge this character forward, like a boxer almost, like they're about to go in for a fight. Start bringing it over. Maybe even bring that leg over here, and then really protrude that other leg way farther out. Since it's pixel art, it's not going to have a lot of perspective to its drawing, but just enough to like really push it. And I might even take some of this, might even push him lower to the ground too. Yeah, just really get that hunched, I'm about to fight look for that character. And then have his expression really kind of mimic that idea. Now in pixel art, you're not going to be able to reflect usually all of this. So maybe some like dynamic lighting. Maybe he's being lit from the top. So add some like dynamic lighting by looking up some different reference. Kind of fill in those muscles. Just start getting better at anatomy. Which I know is a hard thing to say, but yeah, just really reworking it. Figuring out like, how can I make this as dynamic as possible? Yeah, never be afraid to over-exaggerate poses. Like, that's part of drawing. You really want to just overemphasize stuff. Because you're trying to sell a static image to people. So you really need to just swing for the fences a lot of times. You can over-exaggerate stuff, sure. But it's better to try and swing for the fences and see if you can land it rather than not attempting it at all. And yeah, I would just really overemphasize those feet. I'm not sure if they're supposed to be like just one solid boot or something like that, but in general, that's kind of what I do for that one. Are we talking about something? Something I forget to ask about, and the term is tangent. Okay, so tangents are, remember my exit interview for the Academy. Let me take a sip of coffee and then I'll get into that. So, I'm trying to think of the best way I can talk about tangents. Okay, so let's say tangents are such a weird rule too. Like, they make sense once you understand them, but talking about them is kind of different. I think the best way I can kind of describe this to all of you. So tangents are kind of like where two lines intersect where they're not supposed to type of deal. You kind of want to have like lines almost off balance or not feeding into each other, not feeding into corners in a sense. How do I make a tangent drawing? I've worked my whole life to not, for the last like 7 years, to try and not to. Well, let's say I'm like drawing like Vegeta style hair or Super Saiyan Goku style hair, right? I'd say a tangent is like, okay, both hair points kind of meet right here, right? So if I was to draw like a dividing line right through the center and their chin into that a point, that would kind of be a tangent, but even that's not a great description of the word. It's not a difficult question. I'm just like really struggling to figure out of an example for it. Because in my head, I know exactly what it is. But I've never thought about actually how do I teach someone the same way. Because what usually we do is like someone will submit a drawing. And then I'll look for tangents to avoid. Not to harp on blues, but let me see if I can find some examples in their piece. If there's any tangents in here. For the most part, they're pretty much avoiding them. I don't see any particular tangents on this one. No, not really. Not so much. This one's kind of a little bit of a tangent, but not necessarily. Yeah, I need to find a good example to show you, but I can keep that in mind for the next art stream to kind of go over tangents. Yeah, a little bit. Tangents are like weird. It's like almost if you had a line going straight up into the hair like that. If you had the eyebrows of the character, going straight into his hair like that, that would be considered a tangent. You don't want to do that. Let's see, what would be another one? If you had like this shirt collar end right here and the other one ended right here too, and they kind of went into a perfect thing, that's kind of tangent-y. Basically you don't want lines all meeting up at the same point. It tends to look really weird. Even if you were like doing a curtain. So like if I was doing a curtain, I would want to try and be aware of having them end at different points. You can have some come around the same point, but you don't want to do too many. Yeah, I'll have to think about that one and how to best describe that. Because like I said, during my exit interview, one of the instructors pointed out like, hey, your biggest problem is tangents. So I should be really good at understanding that. But it's basically, yeah, just making sure not all lines meet at the same point, that there's some kind of like push and pull. So like if a suit meets, it meets around there instead of them all meeting at one point. Yeah, you're basically avoiding corners, if that kind of makes sense. Tangerines, now you're making me hungry. Hyperspace cats. So that's kind of it. Yeah, sidewalk in a building. That's actually a really good one. I get for a tangent. A lot of it comes into like perspective drawings with art. So like if you're doing a building on a street corner, you know, you don't want to have like the sidewalk end at the same place as that, you know, all coming off that same point, typically. So like if this is a building corner, I'm actually teaching perspective right now to a bunch of my students. You don't want to have like the building corner be at the same point as that, or you don't want to have like the pole, like street lamp pole, all be on that straight center line too. You want to kind of put them offset. You want to offset things basically in general and make sure that they're not lining up perfectly or they're not kind of going into each other. So like say here's like a street corner instead, and I have the building slightly off where the lamppost is, and then maybe, you know, the sidewalk is kind of like different parallels. Okay, so like this side one would be a version of tangents, so you want to avoid that, whereas you kind of want to go for more of this where you're offsetting everything ever so slightly. Basically, you don't want lines overlapping each other. You don't want objects completely overlapping. You want to make sure that there's a little bit of like push and pull, so that way things aren't feeding into each other and they don't stay stagnant. Like the whole point of avoiding tangents is to avoid just weird design hooks, and it's something you kind of develop over time. Yeah, that'd be awesome, Helena. That would be awesome for you to submit. Like, I want to do more of these. I think it's a great idea, and I teach for a living, so I mean it makes perfect sense for me to kind of do this kind of stuff. So that's the best way I can kind of do that. I mean, I can always make different art lessons in the future about tangents, but yeah, it's just basically offsetting your work and making sure lines don't feed directly into each other and trying to avoid that as much as possible. So like a tangent would be, oh, here's an example. I'm literally looking at this right now, and I can think of it. So say I'm drawing like a character, and they're punching, right? Like that's their, this is like their fist, right? I don't want to have, I want to create like a strong silhouette. I don't want to have like their, what is it? Their fist lining up directly with their shoulder type of deal. Like you want to avoid that kind of stuff where the lines almost fuse into each other. You want to make sure that the fist is either like below that line or above that line type of deal. Like the fist either needs to end here and the shoulder needs to keep going, or the fist needs to be around here. You don't want to have it like connecting directly where that shoulder blade is. You want to make sure that, like, just like with strong silhouettes, that things are just kind of slightly offset so it creates a more dynamic look. Not too much pan. We're still just talking about tangents. And like I said, if anyone wants to submit new work, yeah, just submit it to Sam's Scribble support. And I will be happy to go over it during the next couple streams. This one's staying fairly short because Chris wants to stream later, so those of you that are looking forward to the gaming portion of 10 more minutes, that will be still around like 5:30, I think. We're gonna try and keep this one like around an hour. Okay, so this one was submitted by Sinte. So this actual one's pretty awesome. I like the pose work. I think it just comes down to similar to Blue Lips. Just, you know, kind of refining it over time. I like what they're doing with the sidewalk. I like that they're adding some broken rubble in the background. I think it just needs, you know, to add more. So similar to what I was saying to Blue Lip and to everybody, look up reference. Even if you can't find the exact pose, that's fine. But I know this is in kind of like a meditative stance. You know, I need to find some images of people that are cross-legged to kind of get an idea of how it looks. Yeah, just put it in the Scribble support channel, Pan. Yeah, Blue Lip, if you can get rid of that bot. I think it's Maddie12365. Yeah. Let's see. What was I saying? But yeah, just submit it to Scribble support and just hashtag it with Scribble support and at me with that. Make sure to at me so that way I can search it later. The next one will probably be a while in the future, probably sometime in October, maybe around like the second week or something like that, depending how many submissions we get. But I'll try and make this more of a regular thing, and maybe we'll do it similar like this, where on Thursdays I'll do like a short stream beforehand. So while I'm doing this, even though I'm not directly copying that pose, I'm gonna use it as a reference point. I'm looking at the way that guy has his shoulders, you know, how the clavicle goes down, how the muscles work, that type of deal. How does his chest look when he's meditating? All that kind of stuff. Because like, this type of pose is universal. You don't want to copy that person directly, but keeping in mind how like people actually sit when they're meditating or when they're like doing these type of poses, it's important to look at. You know, one thing that I would avoid is the way that the arms are going right now. I like the idea of the pose, but it looks a little bit wonky. Make sure the curvature, they're bending over, so make sure that the stomach is kind of concaving and the spine is starting to kind of go in like a backwards motion, flowing down into it. Mark where the eyes are. Kind of do some of that similar hair. I'm really just sketching it out. Not sure what the what the character's thinking per se, but just really working on that. And you can make them less muscular too. But start with like stick figure stuff for sure. It looks like the idea of them is to have them kind of like broad shouldered. And they're kind of like Bruno from Pokemon. Like a wide stance. Nice. Yeah, thanks, Blue Lip. So just, you know, looking at how this stuff is working, how his legs are crossed, what he's doing, you know, finding a pose that is similar enough, and you know, you don't want to copy directly, and if you are, just post it with the reference photo and be like, I based it off this type of deal, you know. Slowly working through it. Really just kind of blocking it out. Sometimes I'll just do this and just do shape design, especially when I'm struggling with a pose. But I feel like if he's going to have his hands down on his shoulders, we really kind of have to bring that head down a little bit and bring his shoulders up, because it just doesn't feel natural otherwise. Like, you're going to see more of him, especially if he's got his arms. Like we were saying earlier, you want to over-exaggerate stuff. You don't want to, like, undersell whatever you're trying to do, oversell it. Especially in art. You know, you have to oversell whatever you're doing. He's definitely got some kind of cape or some kind of padding for his upper torso. Some kind of design work. A lot of it just comes down to thinking of shapes and really just trying to keep on continually doing it, learning anatomy, and going from there. It's got kind of a background. Still using some perspective. Horizon line is probably like around there, since he's kind of like leaning against the wall. A little bit of debris. I'll try and put it towards 1 point. My perspective line would probably be somewhere off in the distance. Some debris. Maybe sitting on a sewer grate. I don't know. Really just continuing to flesh out that kind of area, like what's around him. I don't know, maybe there's like a storm pipe coming off from the building. Maybe there's a grate. Maybe it goes up to the roof. Just thinking about what's in the environment and what can add to your piece, what can give it more depth, what can give it more weight. Lowering that, and then continuing to just kind of refine the body shapes as you're going. Sketching's all about, like, you know, refining the design as you're going, you know. Think about, like, how to best, like, what is the character thinking at this moment? What does he want to accomplish? Is he fearful? Is he aware of something? Is he meditating? Is he contemplating? Like, what's his dealio? Like, what is he about? What is he trying to think about? What's he trying to accomplish in this moment? Or where in the story is this taking place? The more you think about that stuff, the more that it's going to sell whatever you're trying to illustrate. So for mine, I'm like, okay, he's like observing something in the distance. I don't know, maybe he's got a rat buddy. This is a really badly drawn rat. But I can't help it. When I see this, I kind of think of the Rat King from Ninja Turtles. So that's where my mind is going. But don't be overly committed to your first draft. I usually take about like 3 or 4 times when I'm redrawing something to really kind of get what I want out of it. Like even with this, I'd probably have a couple more passes before I was like really happy. Trying to remember my anatomy. And currently flubbing it, I believe. Good job on like the curvature of the armbands. That's definitely correct. But I would show like a little bit more of the knuckles. For sure. Especially if I'm trying to get that pose. But something about it is throwing me off. One reason why I don't tend to do these poses too often. Check that. Awesome. That sounds great. Like this arm's a little bit easier. Get a little bit of that shoulder. This one's going to be a bit more in 3-dimension. So this one's going to be coming forward, seeing a little bit more of this arm. Trying to remember all my perspective rules. And even with someone as long as it's been drawing as long as me, you know, even I'll make mistakes. Gonna see more of the knee on this one and more of kind of like that other side of the leg. Thinking about the perspective of it. When all else fails, draw on cylinders. That'll help you maintain your perspective. Bit more of that knee. Once that foot is completely flat, we're probably going to see a little bit more of it. Yeah, this way. Okay. Just slowly kind of working through it. And every artist has their own method for how they illustrate something or how they go about it. And I'm still learning myself, you know. As a teacher myself, I consider myself still a student. There's always new things that I'm trying to learn and get better at. I don't think you ever really fully get better at art. Okay, so like if I had left this right here, that would have been a tangent. Yeah, that's part of it too. Like getting out of that, like this reminds me a lot of stuff that I used to draw Sentai when I was a lot younger too. Learning to kind of get out of that phase and being more like fluid with your drawings takes a long time. It's not like an instant thing. For all of you, like all the art that I'm seeing and that you're submitting, it's honestly not that different from where I was. You know, some of you in some regards are better than I was at the same age. And the best thing about art, and I tell this to my students all the time, just go for it. You know, it's better to be bold than to be timid when it comes to art. I'd rather try for something and fail than not try at all. So part of it is watching out for how the arms kind of bend, oops, and how they recede into each other. Like this one's going out because we're seeing more of that side, and this one's going in because we're seeing more of the other. And I hope I'm getting that right, but I'm so tired I'm not really sure right now. Hopefully I'm doing that right. Maybe I'll look at it later and be like, I did that wrong. But you did a good job, especially with like the curvatures of that stuff with the boots. Like you're following that rule really well. So good job on that, for sure. And I would just say the biggest thing is just honestly looking at reference, looking at other people design stuff, building up your own kind of like palette of design, and figuring out like what you like and what you don't like. There's nothing wrong with like looking at other designers and like being like, oh man, I love the way they draw boots, and like trying to implement that into your own work or trying to do similar type design type stuff. You know, I love the way Joe Mad draws hands, so I really look at a bunch of Joe Mad hands and I practice them, you know. Nothing wrong with that kind of stuff. But even this, like, even though this is better, I'm looking at some of this stuff and going like, alright, I feel like I can still push this a bit more. Maybe it needs to be a little bit smaller. You know. Maybe I need to adjust it a little bit. Maybe this is not where I want it to be. You know. Drawing's all about refinement. So I'm like looking at this, I'm like, I want the arms to be a little bit more bent. I don't want them to be so 90 degrees, you know? So I'm just going to kind of adjust those ever so slightly. Get more of like a curve, like look going to the back. Have those shapes kind of feed into each other. And just kind of keep on refining it before I would eventually, you know, take it to ink. Thinking about all the different tiling, maybe some of it's broken, maybe he's like a Final Fight character, or Streets of Rage. Some of the tiles are broken. Who knows, maybe he's in a prison. I don't even know. You know, it could be honestly anything, but you want to think about all the different things that could be possibly in that environment of that character. And I can already tell you're thinking a little bit about it. You just got to refine that muscle. It's like working out. The more that you do it, the easier it gets. The more you think about that kind of stuff, the more you can kind of start implementing it into your own art. But in general, like, that's kind of where I'd go with this piece in terms of ways to improve it. Just looking at reference, trying to figure out how to draw a pose. And if something doesn't work, just go like, all right, well, next time I'll try something different. Or next time I'm going to try and tweak it in a little bit of different ways. All right, so Helena says, been drawing since I could hold a pencil. Yeah, I'm the same way. I still can't draw some things. I just now feel like, you know, I just crossed over the 30 barrier not too long ago, like a couple years ago, and I'm just now feeling at the point where I feel like I can draw everything. But even this, like, I'm looking at this like, all right, I'd really have to workshop this. I'd really have to figure out, like, how do I want to do these shoulders type of deal. Like, you know, I would definitely, like, this is a hard pose even for me. So it just takes time. Like, I'm finally at the point at my age where I finally feel like, oh, I can literally just draw anything if I have given enough time. Yeah, I mean, getting over that fear of, like, drawing new things and stuff is kind of hard, but honestly, it's super freeing once you do. Just do it in a sketchbook. You don't have to post it. Don't feel like you have to post things on Instagram. I have so many sketches. I have books, dozens upon books, that I've never even submitted or posted or anything. Because honestly, those drawings are for me. I don't mind if people see them. I just don't have any will to, like, that's fine. Like, this stuff I drew for me. It's not for anybody else. If anybody sees it, that's fine. But I just wanted to practicing it better. I think eventually you get over that, Helena. The more you draw, I mean, I have that from some high school drawings where I think, what the hell was I thinking? But in general, I don't have that idea as much anymore. Just because I know that was part of the process of me learning. It was part of me understanding what it took to be an artist and just doing the best I could with the tools I had. Yeah, I mean, that's why I like having physical sketchbooks. I like having physical sketchbooks for drawing when I'm out and sketching. I like going back and forth between the two. I do so much digital work that I think it's super important to work traditionally as well. The skills go hand in hand. If you get good at drawing by pencil, you're going to get good at drawing on the computer, and vice versa. If you get good at painting in the real world, those ideas are going to eventually translate to the computer. They're not one-to-one, but the more you work with that stuff, the easier that it does get. I practice inking traditionally, and that helped me immensely by inking digitally. I'm still not perfect when it comes to inking digitally, and I still think I'm better inking traditionally, but those skills do kind of translate over time. Alright, we've got about one more that we're going to tackle for this art stream. I want to make sure that Chris is able to do his today. So we're going to go over this drawing. So, like, if you're drawing fan art, this was submitted by Valentara. If you're going to do any kind of fan art or you're going to do anything like that, always use reference. And some people are. I'm not trying to knock that. I'm just saying, like, hey, make sure you always use reference. I don't know where on the internet it started getting to be a bad thing, but apparently in some communities it is, which to that I say, forget about it. Like, why? No, artists use reference. We use reference all the time. Like, don't trace over reference and then submit it and say, like, hey, I did this professionally, I drew it on my own. Like, you're lying. But you want to practice? You want to make master copies? You want to study? Yeah, use reference. You want to build a new character design? Go use reference. You're going to build a goblin character for an RPG? Yeah, you don't think those illustrators aren't looking up, like, thousands of different images of goblins and kind of picking and pulling, like, where they want to make their designs? That's just how we work. That's just how our brains go. So it looks like this pose. This is of Altyra. Hey, Retro Gamer. But yeah, it's definitely a hurdle, Lily. The more you just kind of work at, and the more that you can kind of let go of that and just realize that anybody that looks at your work is going to think it's great anyways. And anybody that tells you that your work isn't good, screw them. Who cares? You draw for fun. I mean, I still draw for fun. Like, their opinion doesn't matter. If anyone's going to take the time to put you down as an artist, who gives a crap? You know, there's a difference between criticism and there's a difference between like people just being mean-spirited with no actual input. If it's an art friend that's like, oh man, you messed up on that arm or something like that, it's like, oh yeah man, can you show me how to do that? That's one thing. It's another thing to just someone come and just tell you you're bad, you know? Nice. Yeah. I mean, I draw all the time, but I know that for some people it's like it's a hurdle for them to get over. Grimm's also just a really fun character. I really like that design as well. He's probably my favorite character in Hollow Knight. I really love his animation. I love the way that he was designed by Ari and the team. Just fantastic overall. But if I'm working on this pose, and this will be our last one, I'm just going to kind of look at that Altair design and really just kind of work on the flow of it. A lot of bean shapes. A lot of really just kind of like, I like flowy designs in general. So I'm going to make sure that there's no tangent with like, if I was to do the wing right here as the face is ending, that's a tangent. So I'm going to try and avoid that. So yeah, really, tangents are just like offset, you know. You want to make sure that they're not lining up correctly, like all at the same place. You just want to avoid it. Creates a more flowy kind of design. Now this looks like it's part of Altair's attack. But I'm going to kind of give the clouds a little bit of drag, like an animation. And almost give them kind of like a more wispy nature. And as I'm drawing, I'm always kind of reiterating, especially in the sketching phase. Like, don't be afraid to like just go like, alright, cool. Especially if you're working digitally, you know? Don't be too precious with that kind of stuff. You don't have to be. Draw lightly, you know. And just draw quickly, because you know you can always do another one. I'm thinking this character is just kind of winding up, so there might be a little bit of like afterthought with that tail, like the tail hasn't caught up yet to the animation. Resizing stuff helps too. Check up on chat a little bit. Well, I mean, one thing that I've done, like if you have friends, like we just draw on Google Earth, like me and my buddies. My buddy sets it up for me, and we just draw on Google Earth, and we just hang out. It's a bunch of artists who went to the academy. There's an academy workshop I go to where we draw nude figure studies, but you have to have been a student. So like there's ways to do it. We just do it over Zoom. We can't hang out in person, so we're like, all right, let's just we all want to hang, and since we can't go out like we usually do, let's do it this way. Like there's definitely ways to get around it, but they are a bit more challenging. Maybe bring that wing up a little bit. Always trying to push the design. I mean, I'm an animator by nature. That's what I went to art school for. And obviously with all the Couchling stuff, you all see all the stuff that I do in terms of animation. It's my favorite thing. Chris tries to get me to watch live action stuff, and I'm like, yeah, sure, maybe I'll watch that. But almost always, I'll never get around to it. That said, I'm probably going to watch The Mandalorian. That seems really cool. Can you draw Shrek? Maybe next time. I'm trying to remember what Shrek even looks like. Like, looks like a pig, right? That's kind of Shrek. That's close enough, right? Yeah, that's totally that dude. And he's got like the vest and a bow tie. And there's some kind of jackass hiding behind him. Yeah, accurate, 100%, right? But yeah, for Altair's stuff, it's really just about pushing that design. Ryan trying to get it as flowy as possible, especially with like windy creatures. You know, trying to make sure that the neck and the shapes kind of flow into each other, especially with those clouds. But I like the idea behind what Valentara was going for. And a lot of this, you know, I'm making it look easy, obviously. Just remember, though, that for the last 10 years, I've just been booking it and just drawing all the time. And that's really the only way to get better. As most of my friends say, you're obsessed. I'm like, yeah, no, that's accurate. Even my art friends are like, you might be more obsessed than even the most obsessed artist. I've only met one other person, ironically also named Chris, he's like basically one of my mentors, and was my clothed figure teacher in college. He's the only other person I've found that draws as much as me, and he even outdoes me, which is like flabbergasting, because I didn't think that was possible. He's probably where I got most of my work ethic. Really good dude. Maybe someday I'll have a podcast and have him on with me, and we'll talk shit about what it's like to be an artist. Maybe someday I'll be able to get some of my art buddies on here and we'll talk shop or something like that, some kind of podcast. Hey, Cheesy Butter. We went over your thing, man, but the stream's almost over. I hope you were here for most of it. Shrek Pig, yeah. It's been a few weeks since I have played video games. I've just been drawing and drawing. I would do the same thing, Pan. So when I was in art school, I would just draw constantly during the semester, and then when I got on break, I'd play video games for a month straight, and then I'd draw again for 6 months straight, type of deal. You know, when you get in that groove, it's just awesome. But this one's pretty much ending. I want Chris to do it. We did go over your thing, though, so check the VOD later, Cheesy Butter. I went over your drawing. Chris is definitely going to be streaming, though, in about, like, I think 30 minutes. Give him a little time to set up. But we went over your thing. Check the VOD. It'll be up in, like, I don't know. I think Chris is probably going to post it tomorrow or something like that. But basically, the most thing that I was talking about for your pose is really just push that stance. Like, really deep down those shoulders. Really get it, like, gritty. Really oversell what you're trying to do with your illustrating. You only have one image to sell your stuff, so make sure you sell it as hard as you can. Alright, everybody. This has been awesome. Thank you so much for submitting the work to this stream. I would love to keep doing more of these, so if you have a topic you want me to talk about, say you want me to talk about perspective and how I draw in perspective, or, you know, if there's something about art you don't understand that you want me to go over, that's fine too. If you have a drawing you would like me to not fix, but if you'd like me to have a drawing that you'd like me to look over and be like, hey, how can I up my game? Let me know. I would totally be down for that. I will try and make it not to be as far-flung in the future. And hopefully there'll be more art streams in the future. I'm sorry, I really am. I wanted to do this sooner. I've just been really swamped with teaching. I'm teaching like 8 classes right now. So it's been a little intense, but I'm having a good time, so don't worry about me. I'm doing fine. I will see all of you next time. I don't think the credits are working. Thank you so much to everybody that donated. Thank you so much to everyone that's been here. Stay tuned. Chris is going to be streaming something. I don't know. Death Row to Canada, I think? Making everybody pretty? I'm not sure. I'm going to let him know and tell him he can go ahead and do what he wants. Sorry, I don't think the credits still work. My bad. I'll try them. I haven't streamed in like 2.5 months. So, peace. I will see you all later. Have a good day. Enjoy the stream with Chris. Have a good night, everybody.